The interesting thing about the town that I live in is that in it, there is a giant forest where part of the American Revolutionary War was fought. I always thought it was a magnificent and mysterious place. From my bedroom, I could just stare at the forest for hours, thinking of all the stories it could tell, since my house was on a hill, the forest below us. So I would always travel down to the forest and just walk through it. It was beautiful seeing the light glisten from in between the trees' leaves. To me, the forest was so great that I built a fort in it so I could spend more time in it. The most fun part about the fort was that my friends would visit me there, and we would pretend that we were soldiers preparing for battle. The friend that I would do this the most with was Edgar Larson. One warm summer day, right? That was a couple of days after school got out. Edgar and I were once again in the forest playing soldier. While we were pretending to reload our stick guns, Edgar asked me if we could go deeper in the forest, and that if we went deeper, we would have way more fun. I was very eager to go farther into the forest, but I wasn't sure if my parents would like it. I explained this to Edgar, but he told me that my parents would never know. Thoughts were flying around my head. Most of them said that Edgar was right, and even if I get lost, I know this forest well enough to find my way back. With a frightful voice that evolved into a more confident voice, I stated that we really should go deeper, and that it would probably be a grand adventure for the both of us to cherish. We went out of the front door of the fort and walked down the rickety steps. Every step that was drawing me away from the fort made me have the feeling of regret, but I stupidly ignored it and continued to walk forward. As we melted into the vast forest, Edgar said that he was hungry. I told him to wait till we got back to the fort, but he refused. He threw his slender body to a bush with berries on it. He got about 4 of the berries and shoved them in his right pocket. Edgar said that he was going to save them for later in case he got even hungrier. At the time, little did I know that the berries carried the deadly poison. Venturing deeper into the woods, the trees seemed to start to grow 20 feet, and the landscape became more flat and barren. At this point, we were very weary and weak. Edgar fell onto the floor and said that he needed to eat. He grabbed all the berries and cupped them into his hands. Just as he was about to put them in his mouth, I told him to look to his left. There were some primitive bullets on the ground and old muskets, all covered in dust and spider webs. We were both overfilled with joy and ran to the weapons. We both sat down and looked at them with amazement. Both of us were thinking the same thing. If we took these back, we would gain so much money if we sold them. As soon as Edgar touched the musket, he spotted a tattered Revolutionary War uniform in the hole of one of the trees. He told me to look, and that if we sold that, we would make even more money. As Edgar pulled the uniform out of the tree, a full skeleton fell off and fell on him. We both screamed so loud that all of the crows flew away from the treetops. There seemed to be thousands of them, all screeching at the same time in unison. Edgar ran away and tripped on a root. Just as he was on the floor, I picked him up and helped him run. Right after that scary moment, we found ourselves in the presence of a faint whisper. It seemed to be saying, "I shall punish you for touching my item. They are only to be touched by dead hands." We turned around oh so slowly and found a 6-foot apparition standing in our line of vision. It was the vision of a British soldier who was deformed with the rotting head of a moose. It walked with a limp on its left leg, and the leg that he could walk with was tainted with blue mold and peeling flesh. He pointed his finger, which was bending the wrong way, at us and uttered, "Just because I'm dead, does not mean I can't kill you." Edgar created the saddest cry ever and even made me weep. Tears ran down our faces as we were shot down by true horror. At this point, I was so freaked out that I dropped Edgar and ran for dear life. Edgar ignored his physical pain and ran with a limp, but quite fast. He was able to drag his body 2 feet away from the beast before he fell in a bush full of berries. Being completely starved, he grasped one of the berries with his frail body and ate it. While this was happening, I was hiding behind a termite-infested tree. What I saw was most disturbing. Edgar picked himself up off the ground and then fell on the ground again. Then he started to throw up chunks of past food he ate. This continued for a while until he started to throw up blood and gasp for air, while squirming violently in the dust provided by the ground. The creature came to the scan and lifted Edgar up. The sight of him made me back up into the darkness, casted by the tree. The moose man opened his mouth unnaturally wide and sucked his face into his. His face was being inhaled with great force. As soon as I knew it, Edgar's body was completely consumed by the spirit. All that was left of him was blood that was now dripping from the mouth of the moose. The moose then started to inhale all of his puke to clean his resting place. As I was about to run away, termites on the tree started to crawl on my body and attack me in frightening numbers. I transported my body at light speed away from the spirit while trying to slap the bugs off of me. Next thing I knew, my body was a rag doll falling backwards down a trench into a nearby ravine. My head hit the shallow part of the ravine and I was knocked out cold. I have been unconscious for some time, given the fact that when I woke up, it was the afternoon of the following day. I was covered in the blood of my wounds that originated when I fell such a long way. While I was laying there, I heard heavy boots clomping my way. I forced my wimpy body to shift the other way to see what was going on behind me. What I saw was a man with a red beard, a fishing jacket and brown waterproof boots coming my way. He looked upon me and noticed that I was awake. "Hey, are you okay, matey?" he said in a deep, raspy voice. He picked me up and took me to his wife and kids, where they told me many magnificent stories by the fire. I was later returned to my family and told my parents that Edgar simply died of falling down a pit. The boy became one of our family's closest friends as well. I never told anyone my story, and I'll never go back to the forest as long as I live. I grew up in a large town in Lincolnshire, England. As kids, we used to play in a large wooded area on the outskirts of a town called Bradley Woods. In the woods is an ancient-looking abandoned cottage by a pond, and we told a story about it, which it went like this. Hundreds of years ago, a poor woodsman lived in the cottage with his wife and baby. They lived happily until the woodsman was pressed into military service by the local landowner during the English Civil War. The woodman's wife waited and waited for months for any news of her husband, but none ever came. One New Year's Day, a group of soldiers on horseback came riding through the woods, part of a force that had been plundering the surrounding countryside. Coming across the cottage, they broke in and demanded the woodsman's wife hand over all her money and any strong drink she might have. When she refused, the soldiers beat and raped her savagely before taking the baby and riding off, laughing wickedly. From that day on, the woman dressed in black and roamed the woods searching for her missing child, accosting anyone she met and begging them for any news of the baby. She soon earned a reputation as being quite mad, and so people began to give the woods a wide berth. The woodsman never returned home, and the woman continued to roam the woods, desperately searching for her lost baby until the day she died. Legend has it that her ghost still wanders the woods today, and if anyone is brave enough to walk into the woods on New Year's Day and shout, Black lady, I've stolen your baby 3 times, the woman shall appear and confront them. Yesterday, a friend of mine called me. It was John, an old buddy from high school. I hadn't spoken with him for years, and we started to reminisce about all the crap we pulled in high school. A few days later, I decided to call him back and see if we could get together, maybe go fishing or something. We talked on the phone for a while, and I said to him, "Hey, maybe we should get together sometime." He said that was a bad idea, but then he agreed. I asked him for an address, copied it down, and told him I'd see him in the morning. The next morning, I arrived at the place he said he lived at. There was nothing but rubble there. It looked like there had been a fire there years ago, but nothing got cleaned up, and the plants never regrew. In the middle of the rubble, I found an old rotary-style telephone on the floor, not connected to anything. Hurriedly, I pulled out my cell phone and called his number. The telephone on the floor rang. Once, twice, a third time. I dropped my cell phone in shock and knelt to grab the rotary telephone. A voice, drenched in distortion and hiss, said, "I told you this was a bad idea." A tall, thin man steals up the knoll in the center of the cemetery, his eyes darting from side to side. At the top, he slowly spins around, squinting into the dark. The only other occupants of the knoll are an ancient red cedar and a pair of weathered headstones, one straight and one slightly crooked. The man straightens his thread-bone coat and lowers himself into the tall grass with a sigh of relief. Leaning his back against the cold headstone, he tilts his head up to the dark, cloudless sky. The stars are fading fast as night cedes its time to day. I finally made it, he thinks, plucking a blade of grass. He rolls it between his fingers as a smile tugs at his mouth. From behind the cedar, a second man, the mirror image of the first, leans out and observes him through narrowed eyes. Doesn't he look like the cat that got the cream? He thinks. He allows the first man to enjoy a contented moments before stepping from behind the tree with a smile. Straightening his ragged coat, he saunters over and plunks down cross-legged next to him. The first man stiffens, his smile slipping into a frown, plucking a thick stalk of grass. The second man sticks it between his teeth and leans back onto the neighboring headstone. "Evening, brother," he says around the stem. "Looks to be another beauty of a sunrise, don't it?" I'll just ignore him, thinks the first man as he continues to stare straight ahead. The second man watches him from the side of his eye. "Ignoring me, eh?" He turns to look at the first man and cocks his head, his eyes sparkling. He slowly draws the stalk from his teeth. His smile expands to a Cheshire cat grin as he carefully takes aim and says, "How many people are dead in a cemetery?" The question hits its mark. The first man jerks and grimaces. Still refusing to look at the second man, he raises his face to the brightening sky, willing the sun to rise faster. I'll wait him out. The sky lightens another shade before he murmurs, "You never tire of that joke, do you?" The second man raises his eyebrows. "Trying to wait me out? Two can play at that game," he thinks. He waits in silence, still grinning and twirling the grass stem between his fingers. The first man still stares straight ahead, his back rigid and his lips pulled into a thin line. The sun continues its deliberate ascent, painting the sky pink. The second man leans in. The grass stem twirls faster. Almost there, he thinks. The first man clenches his jaw. A muscle twitches in his temple. Almost there, he thinks. Twirl, twirl, twitch, twitch. Suddenly, a lone bird stirs and cuts the thick silence with a shrill whistle. The first man starts, glancing at the second man. The second man sinks back against the crooked headstone with a smirk and puts the grass stem back between his teeth. His shoulders slumping, the first man sighs, closes his eyes, and thinks, I almost made it. He leans back against the straight headstone, and without opening his eyes, he whispers, all of them. A ray of sunlight breaks over the horizon, illuminating the knoll. Its only occupants are an ancient red cedar and twin marble headstones that time and weather have made anonymous. More birds awaken and join together in a morning chorus as the fading echoes of laughter drift through the tall grass. In this story, some names of the incident will remain anonymous. Only certain traces of evidence, dates, and occurrences will remain as they were. I'm sure some of you are familiar with a water park attraction called Water World, California. Before the water park was named after the state it was in, it was originally known as Water World USA Concord. It was Concord's first main attraction for decades and had been providing family fun for almost everyone. People from all across the USA would come here to cool off during that summer. During winter, however, it would be closed down until next spring. When it reopened, the park would always bring in a new attraction, which in turn would attract thousands of people. On June 2nd, 1997, a group of high school students from Napa attempted to break a world record for the most riders on a slide. The slide which they would ride on was called the Bonsai Pipeline and stood 6 stories high, right below the even bigger slide called the Cliffhanger. About 33 students marched up the wooden tower, pushing and shoving through the tiny vessel, ignoring every liability and instruction made by the lifeguard on duty. One by one, they all slid down the closed pipe, creating a big plug trapping the students, but never made it all the way. Halfway down, the slide burst open from the bottom, making a horrifying sound of a breaking metal and fiberglass. It plummeted the 33 students, who were 40 feet off the ground, onto the concrete floor at full impact, spilling blood all over the water and concrete. All of the students got broken bones and severe injuries, except for one student, a 17-year-old girl who was the last to go on the Bonsai Pipeline. As she was sliding down the tube, right when it was breaking, she fell and hit concrete head first. She died on the way to the hospital. After that whole incident, the area near the pipeline was covered in the blood of the 33 students that fell. That's when people began questioning, are water slides safe? From there on, Waterworld USA Concord took a turn for the worst. Sales went down, and something had to be done. But after another season, things softened down for the park. People began to worry less and take more precautions, and by that time, so did the park, because they put up more descriptive signs and added more vigilance to the park. The park got off good, besides having to change companies 3 times and their name along with it. May 2011 was the month I applied at Waterworld, California. It was a pretty good job. The monthly pay I got, it was alright, but there was too much work. Everyone that works there doesn't really get along too well at times. It always has to be someone not liking someone just because they're assholes. By the mid-season, mostly around June, July, my co-workers and I would start to see and notice some strange things. Since me and my friends are the only ones that closed the park, we would always be told about the incident, knowing that we walked near the same slide that the girl had died on. The pipeline was the same as it was before the incident, although it was rebuilt and renamed. It was on a regular scheduled weekday when I noticed the first strange thing. After a busy day, the evening fell with a strong wind. I was helping a coworker with a trash run in the Luau Cove. We emptied 6 trash bins, each filled to the brim with garbage, put new bags in, and headed to the dumpster. There was a lot of wind coming in from all directions, except even the cove. Since there are 4 pavilions, most of the wind that comes in doesn't go through as much. The garbage cans nearby were standing straight and stationary, even with slight wind pushing against them. By the time we walked back from the dumpsters, we passed by the luau only to see the 4 bins tipped over and the rest still stationary. I looked at my friend in some disbelief, since the only people working during that time in that area was us and no one else. We checked the kitchen, and it was empty. The wind around that whole area was going in every other direction different from the one outside of the park. We checked with our other co-workers, but they were busy with other duties as well. A couple days later, we started noticing even stranger things. I was by the Tube Reynolds on our lunch break with my co-workers when we heard a distant scream from a teenage girl. It wasn't a joyous or horrified scream, but a painful scream. A scream so painful that it gave me chills up my spine. I just couldn't move or say anything at all. We all heard it and just went back to work scared. Little by little, things began to occur. The showers would turn on randomly and stay on for long periods of time, even when we were around. We would feel a strange presence among every corner, ride, or secluded spot we would go to. These things had to happen for some reason. One day, when I was heading out from my shift, I managed to speak to one of the managers, explaining what was going on. He told me it was just the spirit of the girl who had died wandering around the park by herself. She was going around the park screaming in pain, knocking on walls and windows, turning on faucets and showers, and even knocking things over. He even said that some doors open on their own, and it was during the night when she usually does all those things. Could it be that her restless spirit still roams the park because of us, or could it be something else? All I know is that she comes back only during the month of June and mid-July around closing time. The night shift security and other people that have been in the park during the nighttime have also claimed of hearing painful screams from far away and other odd occurrences throughout the park. The very same painful screams and occurrences still haunt the park to this very day. Since the park has a lot of security, I wouldn't recommend staying around after closing times, but if you do, stay alert and go at your own will. I pulled up to the little house on Birchwood Lane, feeling very pleased that I had found it so easily. A gigantic bouquet of flowers sat beside me. I took it into my hands and, with a bouncy pep in my step, made my way to the front door. After only a couple of knocks, the door opened to reveal a stunning brunette with dark eyes and a button nose. She shivered slightly in the fall air and said, "Can I help you?" "Yes," I said cheerily. "I have a delivery for Miss Caroline Lipinski. Is she home?" The woman narrowed her eyes and cocked her head to the side. "I'm Caroline. Delivery?" "Yes, ma'am," I said. "Your grandma sent you some flowers for your birthday. Happy birthday, by the way." Her eyes widened before welling up with tears. "Is this some kind of a joke?" she asked softly. I frowned. "No, ma'am," I said. "A woman came into my shop and said she was your grandma. Adele, I think she said her name was." I held up the bouquet. She chose all the flowers herself, told me exactly what to put in here, and asked me to hand deliver them to you on this date exactly. The woman turned her eyes skyward, as if she were in prayer. A single tear broke loose and ran down her cheek. "I don't believe this," she said. "You have to be joking." I can promise you I'm not, miss, I said. I'm sorry if I've upset you. I can go if you... No, it's alright, she said. Would you come in for a moment? I hesitated, but finally agreed with a sure. She brought me into a charming, sunlit living room where a large fireplace adorned one wall. My eyes were drawn to the mantel, where some pictures had been arranged with the greatest of care. There she is, I said, pointing to one of the photos. Your grandma. This is the lady that came into my shop. Oh God, Caroline spouted. She brought her hands together in front of her face. Please, sit down. Derek, I said. Thank you. I took a seat on the sofa, holding the bouquet in front of me. You can put the flowers on the table. I'll grab a vase in a second, Caroline said, lowering herself into a nearby armchair. But first, she continued, I need you to tell me everything. What do you mean? I asked, furrowing my brow. When that woman, my grandmother, came into your shop, she paused for a moment. I could tell by the quiver of her lips that she was fighting a burst of emotion. At last, she regained her voice. I need you to tell me exactly what happened. I pursed my lips and rubbed my knees as the image of that day came to mind. Well, I said, I guess it was pretty straightforward. It was a slow day and this little old lady came in and said her granddaughter was turning 24 in a week, and could she please pick out some flowers so I could make her a bouquet. And so I followed her around the store. She picked her flowers, told me to hand deliver them a week later, and then she paid and left. Caroline leaned forward. And it was definitely the woman from that picture over there? As God is my witness, I said. Why? Caroline was silent. She slowly rose from her seat and began to wander toward the picture. I don't know how to tell you this, she said. She inhaled sharply and turned to face me. My grandmother, the woman you saw, is dead. I straightened up. Oh my God, I said. I'm so sorry. I had no idea. It must have happened so recently. Yes, she said. But you said she came in a week ago? Yes, I said. I have it logged in my system that she came in and made her purchase exactly a week ago today. Caroline was visibly shaking now. She stared intensely into my eyes. The funeral was 2 weeks ago. My jaw dropped. She cut me off mid-stammer. Her tears flowed freely now as she flopped down onto the sofa beside me. I want so badly to believe what you're telling me. She buried her face in her hands and sobbed. Gingerly, I inched closer and placed an arm around her. I gently rubbed her back as she continued to cry. Shh, I said. It's okay. You're okay. When at last her sobs began to lessen, I spoke again. You know, I posited, I think this might have happened for a reason. She looked up at me, her eyes wide with confusion, and her eyebrows knitting a darling little wrinkle in her forehead. What do you mean? Well, I continued. What if, just what if, your grandma didn't want you to be alone on your birthday? Alone? She repeated. Yeah, I said. What if she wanted to send you some company? Maybe, not just any company, maybe the company of a nice young man, about your age. She tilted her head to the side, keeping her eyes locked on mine. You know, I continued, both of us being single, are you single? Yes, she said. She had completely stopped crying by now, and I could see that. Deep inside, the gears were turning. She always did want me to be happy. I reached over and brushed a strand of hair out of her face with the lightest touch. Do you think I could make you happy, Caroline? She answered by pressing her lips to mine in a violent show of sudden passion. From the living room, up the stairs, through the hallway, and into the bedroom, our kiss only broke to allow for gasps of air. There wasn't a single wall the whole way that one of us hadn't slammed the other against in a fit of carnal hunger. What ensued was the hottest, filthiest, most bestial fuck session I'd ever encountered since I'd first started playing this trick. It was simple enough. I'd start by rifling through the obituary section of the local newspaper. I'd look for the ones with pictures of the deceased and then Facebook stalk their list of family members, hoping to find the hot daughter, or niece, or granddaughter in this case. Caroline was particularly convenient. What with her grandma dying just 2 weeks before her birthday, I wished they'd all work out that cleanly. I lay basking in the afterglow of my latest conquest with Caroline resting her head on my chest. A far cry from the blubbering mess she'd been downstairs. She now hummed a blissful little tune as she absently traced circles on my skin with her finger. All in all, I'd say she was having a pretty good birthday, possibly the best in recent memory. It was then that an old familiar feeling overtook me, as it always did in these situations. "Hey," I said, "I've got to piss like a racehorse. Where's your bathroom?" She smiled sweetly, pointed out the way, and sent me off to my destination with a kiss. I didn't realize that night had fallen during our little romp, and was momentarily startled by the darkness of the hallway. I stepped carefully through the shadows, feeling around for a light switch. All the while, the floorboards creaked and groaned beneath me. In spite of myself, between the darkness and the creaking, a tingle of anxiety started working its way up my spine. "You're being an idiot," I scolded myself. "There's nothing to be scared of." To reach the bathroom, I had to pass the stairs that led back down to the first floor. As I neared them, I heard a sound. Someone was moving around down below. I stopped dead in my tracks. All the horrifying possibilities ran through my mind: ghost, intruder, etc. A full minute must have passed before I realized I was being silly. Caroline probably has roommates, I thought, or other family that lives here. Most people do. Encouraged by my thoughts, I straightened up and strolled past the top of the stairs. It was out of pure curiosity that I looked down as I went. I stopped again. My heart leaped up into my throat. Standing at the bottom of the stairs was a figure, aged and bent. I'd seen that face before. It was the same woman from the picture on the mantel, Caroline's grandmother, the same one who had been dead for weeks. Waves of malicious intent radiated up from where she stood. For what felt like an eternity, we simply stood there, staring each other down. Then, with a motion that was surprisingly firm for such a feeble frame, she started up the stairs. I ran. I could see the bathroom at the end of the hall, my salvation. Frantically, I reached inside for a light switch, but couldn't find a damn thing. I could hear the woman's rhythmic steps getting nearer and nearer. There was no time. I threw myself into the darkness that filled the tiny room and slammed the door shut. The darkness that surrounded me was heavy. I couldn't make out my hand an inch in front of my face. I felt up and down the nearby walls for any sign of a light switch, the sound of my heavy beating and beating heart pounding in my ears all the while. At last, I fingered that familiar plastic button and pushed it eagerly. And there she was. She stood directly in front of me, her scowling face just inches from mine. I screamed louder than I've ever screamed in my entire life. Her hair was thin and hung messily about her shoulders. Her eyes, hateful black coals, burned fiercely out of a pallid and stretched face. A pair of thin lips twisted themselves into an expression of pure, destructive anger. My eyes remained locked on the old woman's face as I fumbled with the door handle. At last, I felt it open, and only then would I allow myself to turn my back on her. I threw the door open and was met unexpectedly by a concerned-looking Caroline. I yelped in surprise, causing her to do the same. "What's the matter?" she asked. "I heard you screaming. Did you hurt yourself?" I didn't answer, but only stood there panting for a moment. I turned hesitantly to survey the rest of the room. It was empty. No sign of the old woman anywhere. I pushed past Caroline and made a beeline for the bedroom. I moved so quickly that I had already put half of my clothes back on by the time she appeared in the doorway. "Are you leaving?" she asked with a pout. "Yeah," I said, and continued to dress. "Seriously?" she demanded. I could hear the emotion rising in her voice, but I didn't give anything even close to a damn. I was getting out of there, and fast. I could hear Caroline spouting obscenities and declaring her birthday ruined as I bounded down the stairs and out the front door. Only when I was sitting behind the wheel of my car did I finally feel safe. I stayed there for a moment, rubbing my temples, trying to make sense of what had just happened. In the middle of my thoughts, I turned my head to look at the house one more time. My blood ran cold. There, in the front window, staring me down, was that same pale face with the same burning eyes. My grandma used to live in a house that was ancient. The house was falling apart and had a termite infestation. We told her many times that she could move in with us if she wanted to, but she always said that she liked the house. 4 years ago, she passed away. It was a really tragic event. I didn't want to know what the cause of her death was, so I never asked. Probably natural causes. Her house was left to rot. It was abandoned. My mother fell into depression after my grandma's passing. She didn't want to talk to me or to anyone. She just locked herself in a room and only came out when she had to go to work or go to the bathroom. My dad worried for her. I wanted her to get better, so I started thinking of things that would make her happy. After going through many ideas, I finally came up with the perfect one. Her birthday was coming up, so I wanted to get her a present. I thought that getting her something that Grandma had owned would make her feel as if Grandma was still close to her. So that is what I decided to get her. I knew that most of Grandma's stuff was still in her house, so I was gonna go to her house and take something from there. I grabbed my backpack and my phone and hurried out the door. Good thing her house was close by. I entered the front porch. The smell of old wood lingered in the air. I tried to open the door, but it was locked. I checked if there were any open windows, but there weren't any. I checked the back of the house and was surprised by something. There was a cellar door. I walked towards it and tried to open it, and to my surprise, it opened up. The only thing I saw beyond the door was darkness. I didn't have a flashlight on me, but I still decided to enter. Luckily enough, light came from outside to let me see what I was doing. There was nothing at all at first glance, just trash and dirt, but at second glance, I noticed a brown door in the corner of the room. I walked towards the door. My hands were trembling with fear, and my stomach was full of anxiety. I had no idea what the resolution of this was gonna be. I reached for the doorknob. It was cold and dull. I started twisting it slowly. The door opened and I forced myself into the room. I thought of going back, but it was too late. I nervously swallowed saliva and progressed to my destination. The room was dark and humid. The smell of dust filled the air. My eyes quickly darted towards a white box that was sitting in the middle of the room. The box looked like it had been beaten up. It had wrinkles and some writing on it. I walked towards it. I couldn't tell what the writing on it said. It looked like it was gibberish. I lifted the box up and put in my backpack. I wasn't gonna waste time opening the box. I had to leave. I advanced to exit the room when I heard a whisper coming from behind me. At first, it sounded like it was just the wind shaking a tree, but then I began to distinguish words. "Where are you going?" Goosebumps raced down my body. I looked behind me. The thing that was behind me was almost inexplicable. It was a young woman. She was missing half of her body. The skin on her face was torn apart, and you could see the muscles twitching and the blood spurting out. She also stunk of rotten meat. She looked at me. I was in shock. I didn't know what to do. Should I run? I thought. My eyes. I want them back, she rasped. I ran out of the room as fast as I could. I went up the stairs and exited the house. I started to slow down when I was halfway to my house because I had to catch my breath. What had I seen back then? When I got home, I hurried to my bedroom. I tried to open up the white box by hand, but I was unsuccessful. It had too much tape on it. I went to the kitchen and got a knife. I cut open the tape and opened the box. A pair of eyes looked back at me. Inside the box was a pair of rotten, wrinkly, veiny, disembodied human eyes. I instantly let out a yelp. I didn't know what to do with them. I noticed a piece of paper behind the eyes. I went to my trash can and emptied out the eyes. I took out the paper. It was a picture of a young woman, exactly the same young woman that I had seen in the cellar. I heard something behind me. I turned around and discovered my dad giving me a confused look. "Why are you holding a picture of your grandma?" he asked placidly. Carl reached the end of his driveway and took a left. He was a bit puzzled as to why he hadn't gone in this direction yet. He moved in nearly 2 weeks ago, but so far, his nightly walks hadn't led him towards the overgrown thicket. The bent and mangled trees at the end of the street were covered in strangling ivy. Desiccated thorn bushes hid the rot that lay beneath. The dented old sign that stood before the path into the thicket was aptly lettered with the words, "Dead End." "Oh well," he mused to himself, "tonight's as good a night as any to see what lies in this direction." Following this thought, he lightly patted his back pocket. 2 odd protuberances met his hand. He reached into his pocket and pulled out 2 C batteries. The absent-minded dummy had brought along fresh batteries, but no flashlight. He decided it didn't matter since every front lawn had a lamppost. They'd be coming on soon enough, but he was a bit uneasy. His father had taught him the importance of being prepared before leaving the house. He turned and glanced back the way he'd come. A slight bend in the road hid his quaint little bungalow from view. The decision to forego heading back to retrieve his flashlight was made when he stumbled over a raised bit of sidewalk. He agilely recovered himself and slowed his quickened pace. It seemed quite odd that he'd already walked so far in just a couple of minutes. His calculation of just how much time had elapsed changed when the sun disappeared behind the trees. The lamppost still hadn't turned on. Just then, Carl heard a strange noise. He spun around, but couldn't make out anything more than a few feet ahead. Something darted past him on his left. He quickly turned toward it, but once again, he couldn't see anything. The light breeze picked up momentum, carrying with it the same noise as before. Now stiffly at attention, Carl could make out a whimpering moan. He muttered, "Sweet Mary Joseph," under his breath. Suddenly Carl felt childish. He found himself out after dark, and there he was whispering, like a frightened little boy in need of a nightlight. He knew that all he had to do was step lightly and follow the sidewalk back home. He turned to head home, but just stood there looking ahead. I turned the other way and met with the same issue. He scratched his head. He thought. I turned back towards the way I came when I first heard that noise. Then I turned again, but then No, that's not right. Carl continued to look each way down the sidewalk, but he just couldn't determine which direction would lead him home. The mysterious moaning sounded again. It seemed much closer this time. Carl was shrouded in complete darkness now. He couldn't see his hand in front of his face. Finally, after all these years, he could now empathize with his younger brother, who was deathly afraid of the dark when they were children. He couldn't remember ever being in such utter darkness before in his life. He found it strange that none of the houses on the street had any lights on. Not even the bluish glow of a television emanated from any of his neighbors' windows. His thoughts mirrored his frustration and fear. Where's the moon? And why haven't the fucking lampposts turned on yet? Carl slided left until he felt the grass under his foot. He took a deep breath and let it out slowly as he spun around. He started walking guardedly with the grass and the edge of the sidewalk each supporting a foot. He decided to follow the invisible line between the two different types of terrain beneath his feet until the moon or the lamppost lit his way. The moaning came to his ears again. It was much louder now. Yeah, it's definitely not the wind. His unsteady thoughts reached for some explanation to calm his nerves. He was walking blindly, so he wasn't confident he could travel any faster than a toddler's walk. A moose, maybe? Sure, there are pictures of moose all over town. I saw a moose crossing sign just yesterday. When I get home, I'll look moose calls up online. That's right, just concentrate on getting home and chilling out in front of the computer for the rest of the night. The tightness in his clenched jaw and the bunched wad of muscles in his neck loosened a little once he decided it was just a stupid moose. No moose could compare to the frightening creatures his imagination had begun to concoct. Just then, a lamppost came to life. He was so glad to see again, and there he was standing right in front of his house. He squinted his eyes to guard against the brilliant glare from the lamppost. Stepping into his yard, he looked side to side and noticed that no other lampposts were lit. Glad to be home, and feeling more than a little disconcerted by his strange excursion, Carl let the observation die on his lawn. He quickened his pace to his porch, and there, lying at the foot of the steps, were 3 newspapers. He remembered fetching the Sunday paper that morning, so he was more than just slightly puzzled. He picked up the nearest one, pulled off the rubber band, and unrolled it. Emblazoned across the front page in bold black was the heading, "Murder on May Street." The accompanying photo was of a police officer standing sentry over the path leading into the thicket. Carl glanced at the top of the page. Tuesday? I don't understand. He quickly skimmed through the article, while a horrible feeling began to bubble up from within him. The body of an unidentified man was found brutally. Carl dropped the paper and stumbled back onto his lawn. He slumped to the ground in shock and rolled onto his back. He could see the moon directly above him spread out across the night sky. It seemed so large and imposing. Just then, the lamppost went out. The moon offered no reprieve from the darkness as a loud moan echoed along May Street.